Why didn't The Incredible Hulk get more of a smashing reception? Was there simply too much competition? Or was this would-be Marvel hit just more green than mean? 2008 may feel like an eternity ago, but it was an important year for the Marvel Cinematic Universe as Iron Man became a surprise hit. The same year, Marvel Studios released The Incredible Hulk, starring Edward Norton, which was intended to build towards the Avengers, and perhaps something even bigger. However, the first and only MCU Hulk film remains a low point in the franchise, and is by far the lowest grossing entry to date. Luckily, it wasn't bad enough to derail the studio's larger plans. As for what went wrong with 2008's The Incredible Hulk, the answer is complicated, and there's not one single factor to blame. A mere 5 years earlier, director Ang Lee tried to bring Bruce Banner to the big screen with Eric Bana in the titular role. Sadly, 2003's Hulk was not quite up to modern superhero movie standards, and it certainly didn't thrill audiences in the same way that Spider-Man or X2 did. The film earned $245 million worldwide at the box office, which is not nearly enough to justify its $137 million production budget, even at a time when home video sales were far more robust. Instead of making a sequel, the series was rebooted with Norton in the lead role. It's also important to point out that 2008 was a radically different time for Marvel Studios. Disney's buyout wouldn't come until several years later, and Marvel had cut a deal with Paramount Pictures, who would release Iron Man. However, it was Universal Pictures that released director Louis Leterrier's The Incredible Hulk, as the studio controls the rights to solo pictures starring the character. That's why Mark Ruffalo's Hulk only ever appears in team-up films. Iron Man arrived in theaters in May 2008 and became a huge, unexpected hit for Paramount. Universal decided to bring The Incredible Hulk to theaters on June 13th, just over a month after Tony Stark's debut. While the film topped the charts in its first weekend, heavy competition from the likes of Get Smart and Wall-E most definitely worked against the superhero flick. Norton's solo Hulk film topped out at $134 million domestic, to go along with $130 million internationally. This made for a grand total of $264 million against a reported budget of $150 million.
What? I see this as an absolute win.
Unfortunately, the general movie-going population in 2008 did not. And while the right film can rise above the competition and become a hit, reviews and word of mouth were not strong enough to carry The Incredible Hulk. Critically speaking, the film's reception was mixed. The Incredible Hulk holds a 67% critical approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, with the audience score sitting at a similarly lukewarm 70%. While many Marvel fans have discovered the movie in the years since its release, general consensus at the time of its release was less enthusiastic. Before Marvel Studios started seriously building up to 2012's The Avengers, the idea of a cinematic universe simply didn't exist. While Marvel Comics had been doing crossovers for decades, the notion of having to watch a movie because it would potentially tie into something larger was not yet established. As a result, Marvel fans could quite happily watch Iron Man without seeing The Incredible Hulk. If the movie had been released even a couple of years later, closer to the end of Phase 1 of the MCU, audience members might have been more inclined to see it. Unfortunately, at the time, The Incredible Hulk was just another superhero movie and not a must-see event. The failure of Norton's Hulk outing isn't necessarily down to the studio or the filmmakers. In the wake of the superhero movie boom, a project like The Incredible Hulk makes so much sense, especially when coupled with the promise of the MCU. It's just unfortunate that it was released in the same summer that Iron Man and The Dark Knight changed the game for comic book movies. If The Incredible Hulk wasn't sandwiched between so many other big movies, maybe it would have gotten a better shake at the box office. The reviews certainly weren't bad enough to blame the filmmakers for its failure, but perhaps Universal deserves some scrutiny for choosing a release date with such high competition. Beyond that, Norton's Hulk moment just wasn't meant to be.